This is Ed Sanderson. I'm the CEO of Ducerus, your total college solution. And today I'm joined by Hilary Lefitz. If her name sounds familiar, we did a video on anxiety. And today we're going to talk about failure. I hate that word, but we're going to talk about it. That's why we're going to talk about it, because it's kind of an ugly word. And we're going to talk about how to deal with failure. And we're going to highlight a couple of subject items or line items inside of that. One, how do you define failure? Two, how do we think about failure? And then how do we reposition our thought process for ourselves and for our students or our children as it relates to failure? Hilary has a very distinguished career, 25 years in social work. She has a master's of social work and has spent the last 7 years working with students and parents as an independent education consultant. Hilary, it's great to have you back.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me again.
Oh man, this is a big deal to me because this subject is a mindset subject, and I was super excited that you wanted to talk about this. So let's get into it. How do you define success and how do you define failure? Let's just start with some definitions right off the top.
There's the dictionary definition, which I don't want to read to people, but I think it's an individually designed definition in a way, because somebody could get a C on some kind of a test and consider that failing, versus another kid or an adult or anybody could get a C and be super excited because maybe it was in math and math isn't their strong suit. But when there's the expectation of perfectionism, which kind of runs rampant through, I think, our country, and the need to be perfect all the time, nobody can be perfect all the time, and we're all going to mess up. And failure does have a negative connotation to it. But if you reframe it, it isn't such a bad thing. Sometimes it turns out to be better than had you just gotten an A or a B.
Let's talk about that word, reframing it. What do you mean by that?
There's the whole terminology that, Carol Dweck coined of open mindset or closed mindset. And I was watching her do one of her talks on YouTube. And I think it was a school in Chicago. And I just absolutely loved this. The school, I think it was just doing maybe some trial errors, playing around with different way to teach kids. And instead of giving them a fail or a bad grade, they said they gave it a grade of not yet. And I loved that because I don't know if you remember, but when I've gotten an F on something or a D, it's devastating. You feel like you're stupid, or I do, all the things that go with it. But if someone says to you, not yet, that means you just haven't learned it yet, or it hasn't been taught the way you can learn it. And so that, I think, is a great framework to use in terms of, okay, if you do get a not yet, what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to make it so that you understand and can pass and whatever you need to do? Failure has been transformed from an action as an I failed to an identity, which is I am a failure. And I think what I was saying about the F, if kids, young kids, college kids get that F and they feel like internalizing it as they're a failure, that's not good. They just maybe don't have a mastery of something certain, but that doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means you didn't get it yet. My other quote that I'll say is, failure is not the opposite of success. It's an integral part of success and absolutely essential to learning. And Jed Appleruth, who does test prep, said that. And I think that's kind of how I want to frame this talk today, of looking at it differently.
One other question related to that word failure. Do you find in your experience that sometimes it can be synonymous with stupidity or being dumb? Do young people kind of put those two pieces together? I failed, therefore I must not be intelligent.
I think most kids think that, especially when you're in high school and especially junior year and you're getting ready to apply to college. And if you bomb out of some of your classes, which I know some kids did with online learning and all of that, and you feel like your chances of success in life are completely shattered. And it's not true. It's not true. It's just you had an experience, you didn't do well on a certain platform, a learning platform, whatever it is, you didn't ask for help. And so you need to explain that, because you can still go to college if you're willing to face what happened and learn from it. Your dreams aren't shattered. You just keep moving ahead. There's a lot of really successful people who have failed things, and they've gone on to be super successful in different ways that they didn't even imagine.
What can a parent do to help the student or their kids kind of reposition their thought process around that word failure? What practical things can they do?
Parenting from the beginning of letting your kids fail, which is, I know for me, is a really, really hard thing to do. And if we're only swooping in and sort of covering for them, they're never going to learn how to figure things out. So for instance, if your kid leaves their homework on their desk and then you race over to school and bring it to them so they don't get dinged, for credit or whatever, one time is okay. But if you keep doing it, they're never going to learn the consequences of it. So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is being able to listen to your kids, because they don't want to upset you. They don't want to get in trouble. But if they come home with a bad grade or something bad, and you instantly just go to that place of, I'm taking away your phone and I'm taking away this and I'm taking away that, instead of sitting down with them when everybody's calm enough and saying, okay, what happened? What do you think happened? What could you do differently? How can you remedy the situation? And depending on their age, let them advocate for themselves. It's super important. They messed up. They have to figure out, the cause and effect type of consequences. When you're praising your kid, your child, is if you're always saying, oh, you're so smart, you're so brilliant, you're the best, you got A's, all of that thing, then what happens if the kid doesn't get an A and they come home with that B or C, which for some kids and families that could mean failure to them. And so the kid feels like, how I started with the New York Times thing of being, I am a failure. If that's how you've always gotten your praise, versus praising their effort. Like, I saw how hard you studied, or you worked so hard on that project, so the effort is a big part of it. If you failed and you showed no effort, that's a whole other story. Noticing who the kids are and their characteristics and praising them because they're really nice to people, or they went out of their way to share their lunch with a kid who forgot their lunch. That's encouraging, being a good person and building their character. Right?
What type of advice might you have for someone who's a teenager going through high school, or maybe they're in college and they're just kind of starting to get some of that independence? What type of advice might you give them to help them manage expectations, particularly centered around success versus failure?
Well, I would say to them first, life is not black and white. There's middle ground somewhere, and it's not either you're successful or you're not successful. And that if you get a fail on a test or a paper, whatever it is, it doesn't ruin everything. It's just like walking down the sidewalk and you tripped in the hole. And so are you going to keep walking down and tripping in that hole every time? Or are you going to go a different way, meaning figure out different ways to study? So maybe you studied really hard, but maybe the way you studied wasn't the right way to do well on your test. So you might need to explore other ways to study, reaching out to professors and saying, I'm not sure what happened, what I did wrong. You know, for the most part, professors and TAs at the colleges, I think they're there to help kids for the most part. And I think they're usually happy to help and make suggestions and all of that. And I always encourage kids to tell their parents. And I know, you know, everybody's relationship is different, but it's important because your parents have had more experience in life than you have. And, you know, in the end, they might be able to offer suggestions and help you and support you, and that don't try to do it all on your own.
I love the one quote, not yet.
Yeah.
I love that. We're just not there yet.
No.
It's kind of what your kids ask you, are we there yet? No, but you're going to get there. You're not there yet. It's not commending them for the grade. Yeah. It's commending them for their effort, their community, their willingness to engage with other people, essentially helping other people. There's no such thing as being perfect. And I think that's one thing that society kind of has pushed us, is it has to be fast and it has to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be either one of those. It's a journey, not a destination. And as a bonus, if something that you're working on isn't going the way you want, investigate other ways to do that. And then fundamentally, which is a big one for me, ask for help. Yeah. So just ask for some help, whether it's your parents, whether it's an educator, whether it's a spiritual representative, somebody who's guiding you. Ask for feedback and help, because that experience can help you get over some of those challenges, what we'll call them. I don't want to use that word failure anymore.
No, but it's also even ask a peer, ask a student who's in your class who did really well, let them, what worked for them, and recognizing we all have our strengths and weaknesses. So math could be super easy for you, whereas I would struggle in a math class. Be nice to yourself, I think, to start with, for kids growing up, because always think about what advice would you give your friend if they came to you and they were really upset that they didn't do well on something. You wouldn't tell them you're an idiot and this and that, but you would say, it's okay. Maybe I can help you figure out how to do better next time. And that, to me, is what it's about, is you just keep trying. The woman who started that company, Spanx, I don't know if you know about that, I think she's a billionaire. I mean, she's done extremely, extremely well for herself. So her dad used to sit down at dinner every night and ask them what they failed at today. Like, who does that? I've never thought to do that with my kids. And I thought, wow, he's setting them up to make failure, one, accepting, two, that maybe you took chances on something. Yeah. And that it was a good thing, but she took the LSAT twice and failed, didn't pass it. And then she ended up selling, I think, Xerox machines or something for a long, long time, went door-to-door selling, which if anybody's ever been in sales, that comes with a lot of rejection. And then she came up with this idea to start this company, and it just grew and grew and grew. So she failed the LSAT twice, but it ended up being a good thing. So sometimes in the moment, you don't know that that's going to happen, but it's not always a bad thing.
When things don't go your way, it's easy to drop your head and be down about it, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the challenge that we're finding is, internalizing that and making it part of your DNA, which can be a challenge, that if you think of yourself not as failing or not doing something well, sometimes it quickly becomes, like you said, I'm a failure. There's something wrong with me. But in fact, it's just an opportunity for you to get dirty. My mom used to say, just go outside and get dirty, and then, dust yourself off and then come back at it again, maybe from a different direction.
I always say to my kids, I give you 24 hours, you can wallow in it, and then you got to move on, because otherwise you can end up going down this rabbit hole that isn't going to be helpful either. It's digging deep and developing that grit that they talk about. Angela Duckworth has coined the word grit, and that, you need grit to get through life. I think you need grit and you need humor. And if those two things, I think you'll get through it okay.
I love it. That's great information, great feedback. As usual, Hilary, I enjoy the conversation. Very well done. I can't wait to get together and chat with you some more. I think we're going to come back and talk about anxiety some more, which I think kind of these two subjects fit hand in hand a little bit.
100%.
Yeah. And so I look forward to doing it again with you real soon. Thanks for being on.
Okay. Thanks, Ed.